Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Bird, founder of Acquisition Conference, coming to Salt Lake City on March 21st, 2025, and I'm joined here with Bodi Braithwaite. We are on the Acquisition IQ podcast right now. And, Bodi, you've got an extensive amount of experience. I'm actually going to read here your bio. Experienced partner with NOW CFO with a demonstrated history of working in accounting and finance industry, highly skilled in operating budgets, cash flow forecasting, equity and debt financing, international accounting, management, and financial reporting, as well as strong professional with a master's of business administration with an emphasis of accounting from the Utah Valley University, as well as your father. You've got 3 kids, and it sounds like you said they take up most of your time.
Oh yeah, definitely working, staying home busy with the kids.
Yeah. Well, as business owners, we're busy as well, and we don't want to work for nothing. And I think that as we continue to grow what we have, we're looking for potential expansion, but also efficiency within what we do. And I believe as an M&A professional and somebody that works with companies time in and time out for you, there has to be some efficiencies and systems that you're seeing with businesses that you've helped. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, I'm actually glad you brought up the word efficiency. 'Cause, thinking of M&A transactions, companies, the successful ones we've been a part of and ones that we've had some struggles through. I mean, the efficiency piece of it really comes down to what you're striving for in the end of it. That's where a lot of the businesses we start out with, they've bootstrapped it, they've grown, and they keep going and going, and tack on new systems, new people, new product lines, and they get through the day to day. But getting to that efficiency point where processes can run unattended or very minimal input, that's
Mm-hmm.
where in mergers and acquisitions particularly, that's what they're looking for is that engine that's
Mm-hmm.
producing that profitability or producing the outcomes for that business, and it comes back to that efficiency.
Well, I think it's the quicker that you can get to systematic sustainability, but also scalability within the systems that are created through your organization. That is the key for any expansion or any scale. And you see it time and time again with various companies that are very successful in that area. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
When it comes down to again the efficiencies and the scalability of your company, where else can you take it and put in more resources, but get a more exponential outcome from that efforts instead of putting in all the effort and getting a little bit more out of it. How
Hmm.
can you take it to that next level? And efficiencies, scalability, routines, processes, all that play into that.
Well, let's jump into it. So there is a buy side and there's
Mhm.
always a sell side of both transaction, but then there's also team integration, cultural
Mhm.
creation, trust between two parties, establishing a new vision as you align. I think it's important to let's dive into the buy side for you right now. Um, what have you seen has been the best use case of two companies coming together, or someone who's looking for identifying a target, and then what do they do throughout that process?
Great question. So on our side, thinking of the buy side coming in, we're looking at post transaction integration, and that really comes down to the people, processes, and systems. And how can you, to your point, get two or even more? We've been a part of somewhere. They've gone out and acquired 3 to 4 companies in a short order, and we're coming in and trying to be that conduit to get them all to work together
Mhm.
succinctly. So that's where you're looking for those processes in place. Helps with that. The vision, what is the goal of this transaction? In some of those it's vertical integration, some it's getting a bigger footprint or
Mhm.
presence in an area that you haven't been to before. And knowing that on our side, coming in as that outsourced accounting and finance expert can help be that middle person there, be the quarterback to help with the fund that's coming in and making the acquisition, and also the companies that they're bringing into their portfolio. We're that third party that can help really balance and be on both sides of the table and speak both sides and quarterback the process with them.
We've talked about quality of earnings on this podcast many times, and
Mhm.
is that an area of focus when you're going into a buy, an acquisition of a company as a business owner?
Yeah, quality of earnings and as us coming in, depending on where they're at in the process, if they've already been the transaction's done or it's in process, or even sometimes on the sell side too, companies like, hey, this might be a possibility of something we want to do down the road. Comes even with audit prep is kind of how we come in and look at it is, how how's your accounting being done right now? A lot of it's a mixture of cash basis, accrual basis, but when you're talking audits and quality of earnings, you've got to get that to GAAP financial, so the revenue and the expenses line up, and they can really see what's the profitability of the company or a product line. So quality of earnings is something that we can come in and help with
Mhm.
ahead of time, or after, get through some of that noise and chaos of what's on the financials to get to that accrual based accounting.
Why would somebody want to buy multiple companies at once as opposed to just one? Have you seen use cases where people are doing a roll up or a multiple arbitrage? And what is the end result of that? Have you seen that?
So we've been a part of a couple, and the biggest, I guess, things that come through that is one, vertical integration. So they own one piece of, a product going through a process, and they want to own above it and below it, bringing all those in together. So they've done multiple transactions at the same time going that route, just to, it's a learning curve all around. So they just kind of lump them all together. The other portion that we've seen is getting into new territories. So it's a very similar business model. The processes are already pretty similar to what the fund is already used to, or the acquiring company that's going to, everything's going to roll up into. And it's just a new geographical location. So it's not, I mean, it's an uplift. There's definitely work to be had, but it's not as much as going into a new business line or segment. It's just going into a new geographical region. So it's a little bit easier to acquire multiple at a time in that
Mhm.
realm and bring them all into one.
Yeah, we've seen it to be true as well that it's a mindset as well. As a founder, have you ever been in a situation where you've had to console a founder through mindset and what blocks them from actually making the leaps?
Good question. Yeah, so the mindset piece of it and coming into companies, depending on where they're at in their life cycle of the
Mhm.
business. I mean, when we're coming in with our CFOs, the first conversations we have with our clients is, hey, what's your short and long term horizons? What's your exit strategy? Everybody's going to have an exit strategy. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to take the chips off the table tomorrow or next year, but what does that horizon look like for you? And where can we come in and help you? And that's where we understand, where do they want to be? And that can help us understand how they're interacting in the business right now and where do we need to get them to? Because if they want to make an exit pretty soon, but we find that they're heavily involved with everything, that, the business really doesn't run without them in some part of it. That's something
Mhm.
where we come in on our side and can help strategically um, help them with that
Mhm.
process where the business is running. They're working on the business, not working in the business.
Yeah. We see it so many times too with entrepreneurs that they get so excited about starting the business, whereas they're not focused on the complete finish of it.
Mhm.
And I think that is the gaps that we're trying to solve here, of course, with this podcast and all the education and the conferences coming up soon, is to bridge that gap of the entire life cycle of a business, as opposed to just what does it take to start all the energy that I put into this. And then all of a sudden you get to this other side of things where you start to learn about, wait, I could use creative financing, debt and equity to be able to actually acquire a company or multiple for that matter.
Mhm.
And then my exit value is going to be exponentially larger than what it would have been if I had just only acquired one or continued to just build the one business that I have. So it's definitely a different viewpoint, right? And the mindset shift, right? It's you also have to say, well, I can do this as opposed to I can't, and then surround yourself by all the people and all the teams. So that brings me to my next question. As far as team goes throughout the buying process, do you have any suggestions as to who would be the best, squad or team around a founder who's wanting to acquire companies?
So acquiring on the acquiring side, I mean, accounting and finance, depending on what you have in house, or do you need to augment that as you're going out? And you might even have the skill set on your team that could do that role,
Mhm.
but also looking at it from a bandwidth perspective. Your in-house team, are they going to be focusing on your current company or the portfolio that you have? And would it be beneficial to bring somebody in that's just focusing on the due diligence or going out and finding target companies and reporting that? So, separation of who's doing what. Um, Other parts of the process that really lend well to the value in a successful M&A process is obviously on the legal side.
Mhm.
Getting them involved pretty early on can help dictate the structure or what targets might look good from a financial perspective, but maybe there's something else that you're not quite seeing. So legal perspective, some COO outsource as well. Looking at the
Okay.
operation side of it, how does that feed into the business model and the ending profitability that the company has?
Okay. So law, COO. Is there any financing options or any type of suggestions that you would have for being able to finance the buy?
It could, On the buy side coming in, if they're looking for targets, it comes down to what do they have on hand, how they funded the other acquisitions that they've done or in their portfolio.
Mhm.
There's definitely other people we can bring in that help with the funding process of that, can initiate those conversations. Look at other ways to fund a transaction besides from just the traditional loan, or is it um, coming from the fund itself?
Yeah. Have you been able to experience some different ways that people have created a negotiation through a buyout? Because I know there's many different ways that you can negotiate a buyout. For example, for sale by owner, and then do a term sheet
Hmm.
over the course of time, and then you pay out certain amounts, or they could retain equity, or you could do a rev share throughout profit increase. Is there any other ways that you've seen or experienced?
Um, I guess more on our side when we're looking at that, we're more there as I guess a counselor or giving
Okay.
advice on what does your term sheet look like. Because there's a lot of those earnout periods. There's the earnout bonuses. What's up front now, or what are you going to get paid out later down the road. So on our side, we take more of that counselor approach with the person that's going to be impacted by that. What is the feasibility of hitting those milestones? What do you need to do to change to hit those to get to realize those? So I wouldn't say necessarily see other ways that go about it. We don't
Mhm.
really get into that realm of it. It's
Okay.
more making sure the business owner understands what is on that term sheet and what does it mean for them personally and for the business.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. This is Bodi Braithwaite. He's working as he's the lead there at the Now CFO, and just working with a lot of different companies throughout their transactions, both from a buy side and a sell side. I want to dive into the understanding of now the sell side, but also some of the things that you've experienced from a negative standpoint and a deal that didn't go through. Can you remember one of those deals?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it on my drive up here, and not necessarily a deal in particular, but I was
Mhm.
trying to think of some of the recurring things where maybe the expectations weren't met after the dust has settled,
Yeah.
or they signed the documents and it didn't quite turn out how they thought it was. And it kind of goes back to us taking that counselor position to make sure that they understand what's going to be on the other side of it. And a lot of it, I've looking back on the transactions we've been involved in and it didn't have the best outcome, it comes back to the working capital calculation can really change the ending position of a deal and the cash payouts. Part of the working capital too is if they're requiring you to keep funds on hand to cover some contingencies that maybe weren't taken care of in the day to day in prior
Mhm.
years that the new owners aren't going to be on the hook for. That is there as well. Even had some around, just like sales tax payable and inventory valuation, just things like that of where they're there, but you don't think put a lot of value on it
Yeah.
in the moment, and then at the end of the transaction when all that comes together, it's like, oh, the process we had around inventory, if they'd been buttoned up a little bit more, we could have got a little bit better of a value for it
Yeah.
because the processes would have been easier to follow.
And then there may be some hidden costs too, almost like what you were just saying, as to how you start to see for a buyer, you're looking at the due diligence, and then the sell, you're not disclosing actually everything. And then all of a sudden the buyer sees that the price has increased based on your lack of
Hmm.
preparation as a seller.
Yeah.
And then the buyer bounces because it wasn't disclosed correctly.
Yeah, and that comes from, it's usually not intentional by any means. It's
Yeah.
just they don't know what they don't know around that. And that's where it gets into that nitty gritty accounting and, gap compliance. I'm thinking of one of just coming from Colorado, for instance. You sell and ship a product into Colorado, sales tax. I mean, there could be 4 to 5, 6 different sales tax rates that you got to um, collect, report, pay, remit over time of you are in that state. And some of
Mhm.
them, they don't get into that nitty gritty part of it. So to your point, that that's an exposure to somebody coming in and buying that company that could crop up that they weren't necessarily taken care of in the moment.
So for everyone out there, as a seller of a company, make sure to continue to have all of your finances in order, which brings me to my next shift in the conversation. And I want to go into the seller's shoes. And I want to talk to you a little bit about what you're seeing in sellers now, and then also in the past. And then also, how can sellers be more prepared?
Question. So on sellers being more prepared. It's those that see accounting, that it does bring value to the table in these situations. A lot of times it's accounting's there to keep the lights on, pay the employees, and deposit the checks in the bank. But there's a lot more that goes into accounting if you're taking your company to that next level. If you don't want to necessarily be a generational business that you just pass on and stays within the family. If you want to take it to that next level or get more sophisticated, there is a time where you need to put more attention and emphasis on the accounting piece. So some of those, unreported things don't pop up, that they're taken care of. Um, got the
Yeah,
second
no,
part
that's
of that.
good. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I know that again, there's as a business owner, you're gonna exit a company regardless, and it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of if the business shuts down, if you pass away, or you exit the business, and we've heard that time and time again. And also, I've spoken to personally a lot of people where they say, "Oh, I don't need a plan for an exit. Like, no, I don't need an exit yet." It's like, well, technically, it's always something you need a plan for, and you need to plan accordingly for at least a 3 to 5 year out.
hmm
Have you seen that to be true based on your experience?
Definitely that 3 to 5 year timeline. I mean, that's where it comes into going back to, first meeting we have with some of our clients, with our CFOs, is, what is that exit strategy? And we get a lot of times like, I don't plan on exiting the business. I'm going to run this thing and see where I can take it. It's like, well, there's got to be some sort of exit plan and strategy around there. Because a lot of times, right now, 3 to 5 years out, you probably don't think about a transaction. You don't want to sell it. You really want to grow this thing on your own and keep it closely held. But things might change where you maybe in 2, 3 years you do decide, hey, maybe that is an option. You're not fully committed,
Yeah.
but having that conversation early on and doing that prep work over that time frame is really where you get the, depending on your multiplier, how they're valuing the company on your EBITDA number, dictates where you're at in that range. On the low end, you didn't do a lot of preparation. You're kind of just, going through the emotions, or you took your time and invested over the years to get to that higher end of that valuation.
What creates an increased valuation inside of the company while you're doing your preparation, or what type of preparation is needed in order to increase the overall valuation of the company?
Yeah, so as buyers are coming in or looking at targets, maybe they have a two or three or a handful of targets that are all similar, and everything could be the same, but what they're looking at for their best investment is, what's the risk of this? What are the unknowns? And what is the financial performance of this? And depending on the size of the company and where they're at in their life cycle, they could all look similar on paper, but once you start peeling back the layers of the onion, there could be some of those, unreported sales tax in there.
Mhm.
Inventory might not be accounted for the right way, or it changes methodologies as new controllers come in. So that's where, being consistent, having a process, and investing in that possibility of down the road you might want to do a transaction or some sort of exit, getting your business financial reporting wise in the best position is going to, a potential buyer or investor coming in, it's going to calm them a little bit of, hey, they have good reporting. It is timely. It is accurate. It is comparable year over year. It's not this, trying to read through the trees of what does this really mean. So
Yeah.
being that consistent piece.
So to have clarity around the exit process, but also the value creation, who are good people to be able to contact in order to define what it is you need to do in your business to increase valuation?
So it comes at, a lot of the fractional support. So the fractional CFOs, fractional COOs can do it as well. Looking at the operations of the business and where you at now, where do you want to go, and what's in the middle. And CFOs can help out with that as well.
We're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs, they want to do everything themselves, and which you also see is not the best case scenario. And what it comes down to is delegation, and understanding that increased valuation is delegation. And again, back to systems. You guys are hearing it every time we have a podcast. We talk about the systems and the scalability of those systems. Well, this has been good. Would you have any lasting nuggets that you'd like to give people? I know. Let's talk about, actually, before we head out, is we've got this conference coming up.
Mhm.
You and also your company has helped to provide some support, and also you're sponsoring the upcoming event. But share with us some nuggets that you may be able to share on the buy side panel at the acquisition conference.
Well, I guess to hit on the point again, I mean, the
Yeah.
successful transactions we've been a part of, or the ones that we get that higher end of the valuation. I mean, it comes back to thinking of post transaction integration. It comes to the people, the processes, and the systems. How's that going to work after a transaction happens? So, if you're in the mindset right now, I have no desire to exit. I don't even want to think about that. I just want to put my head down and do the grind. Take some time and remove yourself just a little bit and look high level working on the business. I'd be, well, if I had to in 5 years, what would that look like? What would I need to be doing differently now that I'm not? It doesn't necessarily mean you need to go out and change everything and start doing all that, but just be thinking of, where are some of those blind spots where if something does change, something does pivot, you can start working on. Again, going back to processes,
Mhm.
systems. I mean, that's where the investors are looking at is you're creating a lot of results now that entices them, that they're looking at you as a possible target. But what they're looking at too is what's it going to be 1, 5, 10 years down the road,
True.
depending on what their hold is, and how can they take your current engine, make it a little bit more efficient, and get a bigger output from it. And that's where documentation and processes can help alleviate some of that uncertainty that they might have comparing you to somebody else.
Perspective is everything. And when you shift your perspective to what you're saying, then you're able to see things in a different light. And I think that, that's something that we would like to inspire you guys and challenge you to take on is a different perspective shift as to your company in 3 to 5 years. And then also what it's going to take in order for you to become that future self or become that future company that you so desire. Well, this has been good. I mean, I'm looking forward to also hearing you at the acquisition conference talk a little bit more about all of the knowledge that you have here, and just to be in the room. I think a perspective shift, as I just touched on earlier, it's also important to be in the room with people that can share again challenging perspectives, educational perspectives. And that's exactly why we're hosting the acquisition conference, is to one, collapse time and increase your overall education to where when people like founders of companies come to you, then they're a little bit more prepared. And it makes your job a little bit easier, so you're not just having to educate the whole time.
Yeah.
So
No, and that's where I appreciate, being a part of this and putting on this event with you and getting those like-minded people in the room, because, M&A, it touches a lot of areas. There's a lot of experts. I mean, I listed off a short list of those that to be a part of or talk to, but I mean, even, HR part of it, going to the human piece of a transaction. How do we get everybody to work together after it and buy into that vision? I mean, there's so many people that are a part of this that can help make or break a transaction, that getting in the room talking about this stuff is where a lot of this value does come from, because everybody has their own unique perspective, whether they've gone through a transaction or helped with a transaction, and what is their seat in that company, what was their experience, so you as a leader can learn from it, or as a service provider, how could you help maybe do something a little bit different or provide that insight to your client that you wouldn't have had unless you were talking to that person.
so true. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on the Acquisition IQ podcast. And again, thank you for your support up for the upcoming acquisition conference. Again, if you haven't got your ticket, make sure to get your ticket at aquacon.live. The conference here is going to be held in Salt Lake City, March 21st, 2025. And again, thank you so much for watching the podcast. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe. And if you also have other people that are entrepreneurs, founders, business owners that are wanting to either buy companies or sell a company, fund a company, and learn, then make sure to share this with them as well. We'll talk to you again soon.